Condos were the black sheep in 2024. Bad news was everywhere. It didn't matter where you looked. All-time highs in inventory level, mass exodus of condo investors, assignment sales at huge losses, crumbling pre-construction, developers going bankrupt. There's literally no good news about condos in 2024. Condos boiled over last year, but they certainly blew up this year, and it could get worse. The real question is why all of this happened in 2024. Why didn't we see this lull of ongoing bad news for condos in 2023 when interest rates were at all-time highs from the last 2 decades with no rate cuts in sight? Meanwhile, there's been a ton of rate cuts in 2024 from the Bank of Canada. These rate cuts were supposed to spur the economy and bring the buyers back. But these cuts seem to have, a little tiny effect on the condo market, but not that much. So are most of the condo buyers gone for the long haul? There's a reason for all of this that can be explained through the numbers. So if you love data as much as I do, be sure to keep watching this end of year condo recap episode. Hi, my name is Zen. If you're enjoying my data-driven and number crunching real estate updates, be sure to like and subscribe. I'm going to divide this video between the Toronto market for condos, the 416, and the suburban 905 condo market. So if you want to jump to the 905 market, go to this timestamp right here. Now let's start with prices. You can see over here, the Toronto condos in the last 4 years have been chopping up and down, up and down. But ultimately, we're exactly where we were just right before the pandemic. Now let's look at this in a linear fashion. In this chart here, if the line is above the middle line, it means prices went up. If it's below the middle line, it means the prices went down. You can see most of the gains were in the first quarter of 2022, and it comes down quite a bit as with most of the entire real estate market, and had a tiny rebound in spring of 2024 when the fixed rates dropped due to the Silicon Valley Bank collapsing in the US. But after that, it's been, trending downwards in 2024 with a tiny bit of resurgence in the last 60 days. This chart over here talks about the amount of properties sold over list price as an indication of the dynamics of supply and demand. Remember, you can only have realistically a successful bidding war if two things happen. One, you have the best property that everyone wants despite the market, so like a 10 out of 10, maybe 11 out of 10. Or two, there are more buyers than there are sellers. And that yellow line represents the percentage of properties sold over ask, likely due to multiple bids. And it's very, very low compared to where it once was before the 500 basis point rate increase in 2022. And that minor bump there in 2023 was because new listings were low and we got that really low fixed rate like I was talking about. And for this yellow line to move up, which would mean that prices can potentially, not guaranteed, potentially go up, we need the unsold inventory to clear on top of additional sales increasing, meaning the buyer demand returning, which is this dynamic over here, the months of inventory. The lower the months of inventory, the more favorable it is for sellers. So when you're below 2 months of inventory is usually when you see prices go up. You can see over here, we're ending the year better than last year by a tiny bit, but we're still very high, higher than during the pandemic when nobody wanted a condo. And that's because we got a massive surge of inventory in spring and fall of 24 that didn't get absorbed. Hey, it's me interrupting myself. Ready to make a move? Just one free call, no hassle, put decades of experience to work for you. And this chart here shows you the change in the months of inventory in the last 2 years, again, in a linear fashion, above the middle line increase, below the middle line decrease. And that massive increase was after the 500 basis point rate hike. You can see that we got that big jump in 2024 as well, but it's slowly starting to decrease. And the months of inventory is nowhere near 2 for prices to go up, but it's like slowly decreasing. And I've said this, in the past before as a prediction for 2024 that freehold prices and condo prices are going to go in 2 totally separate directions. And I'm going to give you that sneak peek of the predictions for next week. So make sure you subscribe to know when I release that video. You see this chart over here? I've split the months of inventory out for Toronto condos into even more segments, specifically for bedrooms, like, bachelors, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. And you can see that massive dark blue line, that's bachelor units, right? 0 bedrooms. It's at 8 months of inventory, where when you look at the 1 and 2 bedrooms, it's below the average, and 3 bedrooms kind of middling in the middle. We're going to get a bifurcation in condos in 2025 between livable condos and investor condos, which, I'll classify as micro condos that are very small, sub 450 square feet, or very small 3 bedrooms, around 800 square feet, that nobody wants, as most of the buyers in Toronto right now are end users. And those are not end user type condos, so nobody wants them. Now, here are the sales for Toronto condos, and you can see that with the 2 jumbo rate cuts that we saw recently, the sales ticked up a little bit. Again, just because it's up a tiny little bit, it doesn't mean it's where it should be. You see the 10-year average line right there? We're still well below it. So to wrap, the Toronto condos are still in elevated unsold inventory levels, but the rate cuts have moved some end user buyers off the sidelines, not investors, just off the sidelines to start looking for that home to live in again. Now, if you're enjoying the end of year recap, I'll be releasing the freehold one later this month, so make sure to stay subscribed to know when I release that video. Now let's move to the burbs, the 905. And I will note, while I do bulk all the cities together, a majority of the data comes from the larger cities like Mississauga, Vaughan, and Markham, where there are very large clusters of condos in their downtown respective core. And you can see the average price is, surprisingly still high, where it was in 2021 before the ramp. So it's not like prices came crashing down that much. But here's the thing. The 905 isn't as supplied as the 416 yet, but we're gonna start getting a lot of supply in the 2025 year. Similar to Toronto, the 905 saw a massive run up in pricing in 2022 first quarter, dropped off drastically after the rate hikes, but essentially traded sideways for a year plus before dipping a bit this year. And similar to Toronto, towards the end of the year, the rate cuts that we saw in 2024 made a difference, and it's kind of moved the prices and the sales up a little bit. Now, the percentage sold over ask, just like Toronto, kind of behaved very similarly, but the highs were much higher in Toronto and the lows were much lower in the 905. As for the months of inventory, you can see it's had a minor uptick last month, but I can see that it's still quite soft right now as more and more 905 completions are coming online very soon. The thing I have noticed is that Toronto has come down in price, and most people aren't willing to buy in the 905 if Toronto's so similar in price. So there's a little bit of pricing pressure for the 905 condos to come down, in addition to the fact that tons of stuff is completing in 2025 in the 905. Now, if you look at this chart here, which is the months of inventory change, you can see that it's slowly piling up. Almost non-noticeable, but the inventory level is rather high right now, even from piling up very slowly. Especially if you isolate for certain city centers like Vaughan and Mississauga, which have even more inventory piling up. Now, here's the months of inventory broken down into bedrooms, similar to in Toronto. And you can see that there's a massive number for the months of inventory for bachelors, which is at 18. It's so ridiculous, right? If you think about it, why would anyone want a bachelor's in the suburbs is beyond me, especially if it has no parking, which 18 makes sense. But most of the inventory, I would say, is like in the 1-bedroom space with parking, maybe some with a den, maybe some with 2 washrooms, which were very popular layouts with investors in the last 10 years as they were buying up the 905 condos as they were being built and sold. The 2-bedroom units are surprisingly low in inventory because they're actually much more livable, usually the corner wraparound units. However, they're still very expensive right now. And given most new product is priced around $900 a square foot plus on the resale market. Now, as for sales, you can see that sales are very similar to Toronto. They're up from the 20-year lows in the last 2 years, but nowhere near the peak during the pandemic, and ultimately still under the 10-year average. But I would take this number with a grain of salt. Since the 905 condos were made very popular in the late 2010s, so the 10-year average may be a little wee bit off for the starting years because there wasn't that much stuff. Now, here's the scariest chart of them all. Unsold inventory. That inventory level is crazy high right now. We're at 3,000 unsold properties ending the year, and mostly made up of investors of like 1-bedroom units. And we have a lot of 905 condos completing next year, like I was saying. And most of those were sold at fairly high prices too, relative to current market prices. So I think this could be a little bit problematic. But more on that on the predictions of condos next week, so make sure to stay subscribed. Now that's a wrap for how condos fared in 2024. And to give you some context, if you're wondering why I didn't talk about pre-construction condos as much, it's because it's in a totally separate market where I think there is going to be a lot of trouble with like over $15 billion of underwater condos coming up for completion in 2025 and 2026. And this is exactly what I talk about in this video. It's not a hyperbole. Like, by my math, 2025 is going to be a horrible year for condos completing that were sold for 30 to 40% over what they're worth right now. It's going to be interesting, to say the least. So make sure you check out that video. And remember, your move, your future. See ya.